Okay, great. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We're here to talk to you about prepaid and how it is going to assist us and drive us forward in this new environment of digital payments, open banking, and all the things we've experienced over the last 18 months that have accelerated and are continuing to do so. If you read our description in the panel submission that we put together, we're calling this "Prepaid is Eating the World." And everybody knows that's a play on words with the old software is eating the world, because it really feels now like prepaid is having quite a moment in terms of being really the platform for payments innovation of choice that we've experienced growth of over the last 15 years, but has accelerated dramatically during the pandemic and forward. So I'd like to introduce you to our panelists today. I'm Jennifer Tramontana. I'm the president of the Fletcher Group. We're an agency that supports payments and fintech companies trying to build awareness and leads and thought leadership and reputation and all that good stuff. I'm also very honored to serve as the executive director in Canada of the Canadian Prepaid Providers Organization. And I'm joined today by three other panelists who I'm very lucky to say are not only people that I know, but are colleagues and friends as well. So I think we're going to have a pretty fun discussion. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Michelle Baio, who is the CEO of Finnovator. Michelle, hello.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hey. Good to see you. Scott Johnson, who's the Vice President of Business Development at Galileo Financial Technologies.
Great to be here. Great to see you as always, Jennifer, and thank you.
And Jeremy Kuiper, who is the head of emerging payment solutions at MetaBank.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
All right, so I'd love to start. So here's what I'd love to start with, you guys. I still feel like not only just when we're speaking to sort of outside entities, and I do a lot of work talking to governments and particularly in Canada. And there's always this like sort of shocked and aha moment that prepaid is behind all these things they've heard of. But I think that that is true for our industry as well. I still believe that those who are not deeply in the prepaid space, there's sort of a lack of understanding of how much prepaid is really behind and fueling everything that we're seeing in terms of innovation. So I'd love to really just start there, like, and sort of level set of what prepaid is really supporting today, and how we feel like that's going forward. So Scott, can you kick us off there? What is your view of someone who's been in this industry for quite a while? What does it look like today for those who may not know what's behind the scenes?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So I think what's so interesting about it, and we do get this question a lot of times, about, hey, well, what do you really do and what's going on in this industry, in this space? It's nice because where we sit, with Galileo being kind of core to the infrastructure, we're able to see a lot of the different use cases that are going on in the marketplace. And it never ceases to amaze me, even as long as I've been doing this, how many new innovative ideas are out there, and how many, to your point, how many things are really behind the scenes that people will see great, fintech constructs or new card programs or payment constructs, and really prepaid is at the heart of that. We're seeing a lot of new innovation. We've seen great, new programs in the parent-teen space, as an example. It's a space that for a number of years had been a little bit unserviced, and now, with the great, platforms that are out there and partners that we support in the marketplace, we're seeing really cool innovation where parents can really control where their teens can spend down to the merchant ID level. So you could say, I want my son to go to the Chipotle that's 3 blocks away, but I don't want him walking 25 blocks down the street, so I'm not going to let him go down there. Really cool constructs like that we're seeing in the marketplace. We're also seeing some really interesting trends with cryptocurrency and other types of securities. So now we've got, what we're seeing in prepaid a lot is the way to get these type of constructs where you could use your crypto at the point of sale. So some of the really cool use cases that we enable through our platform and through our APIs is I could go out to the point of sale, swipe a card, and we can reach out to someone that's maybe maintaining a wallet or ledger, and they can sell Bitcoin in real time. So I could go to Walmart and buy my groceries, in essence, with Bitcoin is the way that we can facilitate that through the process. We see that also. I've even seen a construct where we've got someone that wants to use gold. So imagine now I go to the gas station. I want to buy gas with gold. Through this prepaid construct, we can reach out to our partners. They can sell 0.00059 of an ounce or whatever it is of gold in real time to pay for their groceries. So we're seeing these types of innovative constructs. Earned wage access, we're seeing some really interesting things going on as well. And even payments out to, gig economy workers in real time to be able to do those type of payments. So I think as you take a step back and kind of digest all of those various types of constructs, really what's at the heart of that is the infrastructure, with prepaid being at the heart of these constructs, with funds being able to move in and out of these types of use cases. So we are seeing just a ton of innovation with prepaid really being at the heart of that.
Thank you. Michelle's up in Canada, everyone. She's based in Toronto. And I'd love to know, Michelle, what your thoughts are in the Canadian market. Does that track with what you're seeing?
Yeah, definitely. I think everything that Scott's mentioned, prepaid's definitely one of the most, or the only innovation rail sitting within Canada before open banking gets here. And I think having the access and being in prepaid since 2015 and previously working with Incom, I was able to see, the traditional prepaid that most people know, which is going to a retailer and picking up, an Apple card or a Google card or a Visa MasterCard that's prepaid. And that's their traditional play. But then when you take the API infrastructure and you start creating prepaid cards that have accessibility for, let's say, businesses having healthcare spending accounts where normally, maybe they didn't get the benefits for their employees because it was quite expensive. Now they can go out there and get a healthcare spending account, put it on a prepaid card, and have it activate or only be able to be utilized at approved medical organizations. So really just making it seamless and helping business owners have accessibility to better healthcare, both in Canada and the US through functionality and infrastructure that's coming out using prepaid. And I think even insurance products, there's so many different industries that are now touching prepaid. Even if you look at the Canadian CERB payments, so when COVID came in, one of the biggest things for the challenger banks up here is that they were able to get access to have the CERB payments for COVID go through their prepaid infrastructure, and have many of their millennial customers and new customers actually see a lot more growth and use of their challenger bank because they were getting those monthly payments directly into their account. I think it's really enabling consumers to have better saving, better budgeting tools, really to speak to what Scott was mentioning about parents having better accessibility. There's been a couple companies that have launched within Canada, giving kids the accessibility to, earn their allowance or get their allowance on a digital card so that they can go out in COVID and not touch any of the terminals, tap to pay, as well as, you can't really give your kids cash these days to go to the store. It's just not sanitary in the sense of COVID. So giving them their own card and loading it with $5 or $6 a week based on, chores they've done, I think is a really important skill to teach the next generation on how they can budget their dollars, and prepaid is fueling all of that. So I think Canada, the US, and around the world, a lot of prepaid has driven innovation across the financial sector.
I think those are great points. And just for those who don't know, the CERB in Canada is was the government emergency payments that occurred during COVID that we saw in every country. And I would just echo one thing Michelle was saying. We've seen so prepaid has always been used. There's always been a good government use case and an emergency use case for prepaid. In the US, around the world, most governments use it in some way, shape, or form. And that, with all of these emergency relief payments, during during COVID that we've seen around the world, it seems to have penetrated even deeper with new features and functionality and more contactless options that weren't necessarily available before. And to me, it seems like that also it has heightened consumer awareness to the products, just because it's come to so many more people through a government source. Jeremy, would love to get your perspective on this as a leading issuing bank in the space. I'm sure that you see a lot of these same use cases, but anything else from your perspective that we haven't touched on that you think is new and innovative?
So I think, well, a couple of things. One, going to your first statement, is that despite how long prepaid has been in existence, there is still an education process that remains to take place, because there is still some negative overhang as far as how some look at or define prepaid, and the view that perhaps it's an inferior product or comes with greater risk, whether to the payment system, to individuals. And so there's still that education process to take place. It's getting better, I believe. The other is that I think it's so important, if you think about on the premise of platforms, meaning that credit's a platform, debit's a platform, and prepaid by far, obviously has so many, as we've talked about already this morning, such a variety and diverse capabilities and use cases, and they continue to expand, such as the crypto and the gold that Scott was referring to, insurance, government payments, which have been around a long time, but continue to be utilized. And so quite candidly, when we have an engagement, I don't like to talk about it in the terms of even using the word prepaid. I like to speak specifically to the use case, the application, right? Because that is really the narrative. That is what people understand and recognize. If you think about the consumer or end user, they don't have a prepaid card. They have a gift card. They have a payroll card. They have their bank account. They have a disbursement card. They have the virtual card for one-time B2B payments, et cetera, et cetera. So, but it is undeniably, and has been for a very long time, a terrific platform for use cases that the others, the credit and debit, simply don't have the capacity to. So within that veil of a platform of prepaid, there's tremendous use cases, product utilization, and I continue to see new and evolving cases. Embedded payments, right, is another factor. So it's just, I love being a part of it. It's been a terrific growth area, and the opportunities continue to present themselves.
Jeremy, let me dive into a little bit more of one thing that you just said there. So you talked about how there's a credit platform, there's a debit platform, there's a prepaid platform, and we all, probably those on this call, most people know, prepaid's always known as being nimble, flexible, cost-effective, great way to launch, product, runs on the current rails. Like it's simpler, easier, than trying to launch a debit product. But to your point, that idea of inferiority, or that at some point you need to graduate from the prepaid platform onto debit or whatever it is. Can you talk about that a bit? Are you seeing that? Do you counsel your, clients that work for you to make that change? I'd love to hear from you. And then Scott, I'd love to hear what you're seeing in that front as well.
So I would say there is a particular channel where I think that the industry has moved a little bit more or expanded the offering, right? So we have general purpose reloadable, right? And then there's many of the fintech or neobank challenger banks have adopted debit versus GPR, not unilaterally, because GPR serves a very specific purpose as well. But many of those are looking to adopt debit for a couple different reasons. One, there is that overhang that I talked about as far as prepaid being an inferior product, or only something that takes advantage of vulnerable constituencies, which is not true, but it is a perception. You have, on the debit side, it is something that both consumers and regulators probably understand better than presenting general purpose reloadable or prepaid. And you have regulatory parity now with the CFPB rule from a product standpoint in most cases. And finally, that as you look at that a marketing segment, you probably have a larger audience which you are marketing your products to, simply because of that awareness and understanding and acceptance. And so for that very particular channel, I would say we have more engagement and discussions about doing those products as debit, depending upon the use case, versus general purpose reloadable. But there are still many applications where general purpose reloadable, fits the target. But other than that, that's the only area where, most of our engagement would be debit versus prepaid, again, using those platform nomenclature. But at the end of the day, GPR and debit, these are bank accounts for individuals.
What's interesting about it, and to Jeremy's point, is you think about purely from a platform perspective at Galileo, as we're thinking about when we configure programs on our platform, right? As we know, Visa, MasterCard have their classifications, an issuer, that like Jeremy is going to look at this, and Matt is going to look at the specific classifications. On our platform, setting up a prepaid general purpose reloadable product or setting up a debit DDA product, I don't want to say they're exactly the same. There are a few minor configurations that are different, but for all intents and purposes, these are accounts these are bank accounts on our platform, and the feature functionality is almost the exact same. And so I think what's so interesting about kind of this overhang, I do think that there is, kind of a lingering perception at times that GPR might be, if you want to say a tad bit inferior to what you're calling traditionally a debit DDA product in the US. But I think that that's our job in the industry is to continue to educate and to look at these use cases that we were talking about earlier that can be supported through this. And for all intents and purposes, that product is exactly the same. Again, few minor technical differences, a few minor differences that you have, with Visa and MasterCard. Again, rules and regs are different, and Jeremy can talk ad nauseum about some of that on the issuing side. But for all intents and purposes, technically, this is the same product. It's the same product that we've all, that we've had in our wallet or our purse when you think about your standard checking account. I mean, that's what these products are. And so I think that that's, again, our job in the industry is just to continue to always make sure that people understand how these products work.
Yeah, and I think just to add in there, Jennifer, looking at Canada, we have over 30 challenger banks that are within the market. And I would say many of them are using prepaid to get them off the ground. And I think it's same in the US. And as Finnovator does advising from a prepaid perspective, working with US and Canadian clients, I think many of them are starting with prepaid, seeing the growth of their portfolio and their client base. And some of them are actually from having to have the opportunity to give their customers interest on some of the balances that are living with the account, are having partnerships to have that move, but still keeping it as a GPR prepaid, but then ensuring that there's still a way that they can give out some type of interest to that customer as well, because that has become a trend within the challenger bank space, is trying to find new ways to give the customer added benefits through their offering. And I think it's a trend that's growing quite heavily. But I do think looking at the market coming in 2015 and just seeing the perception of prepaid, though it's still skewed, I think it has changed to a better light. And I think it's just constantly sharing the benefits of prepaid and the flexibility that it gives to the underbanked, underserved, as well as many people who have banking elsewhere. And this is just a specific use case that's helping them within their daily lives from a prepaid perspective.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, do we all still think that prepaid is the best avenue for non-banks to get into kind of the fintech ecosystem? And is that entire, bank fintech partnership part of this as critical as it maybe it was 5 years ago? I'd be curious on people's thoughts on that.
Yeah,
Jeremy's going to say yes.
Jeremy's going to say yes. Jeremy, why don't you start, and then I'll chime in after.
Yes, of course, I'm going to say yes. And that is both with and without bias. But so yeah, I'm going to say yes. But at the end of the day, you don't have access to the financial systems, the networks, without that bank relationship. The other is that, as we all know, and historically has always been the case and remains, that relationship between the fintech, the bank, and its processing platform, Scott, are critical, because it is really, it's so important to the delivery of the end product, and both the functionality and the protection of the consumer and the payments ecosystem. So, but there is such a dependency. I mean, the bank really serves in that role to enable that solution to be delivered ultimately to the end user.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, this is, and I remind people, these are the bank's programs, right? This doesn't happen without the bank at the heart of what's going on. Now, what is interesting is we see the different types of companies that are wanting to enter into this space more and more. That's where I see kind of I don't want to say the lines are blurring, but what we're seeing is, what is interesting is the types of companies that are wanting to get into the fintech, ecosystem, whether that's, brokerages more wanting to play in this, life insurance or other insurance types of carriers looking at this. wanting to get more broadly into what I'll call the payments ecosystem. That's the part that is so interesting as we're seeing these types of constructs. And I do see, you know, a trend to where those lines are maybe blurring a little bit more, or looking at saying, hey, do we get more super apps types of things where you say, yeah, I've got my bank account, my brokerage account, you know, my insurance, those types of things, and maybe one centralized app. I think that's more where the marketplace is starting to move and will continue to move, is towards that trend where these, you know, types of services are becoming more centralized, you know, maybe in some apps. But remember, the bank account does not happen without the bank. And that will always be the case. Again, they are the access into the financial kind of networks that way. So again, I do find it's very interesting to see where these lines are starting to blur with those new types of entrants.
Yeah, and I very much think that the bank is the trust perspective to the outer customer. And many banks live in the US and Canada that back largely the prepaid ecosystem. And many of them have built such strong trust, like MetaBank, running so many different programs and peoples in Canada. And there's a lot of new entrants of banks. But for the fintech that's new, like that bank relationship, the processor relationship, and the program manager perspective, and then having the network, Visa or MasterCard behind it, it is such an important aspect of giving them the credibility they need to get into the market and build that customer base. So that's what makes prepaid so unique. It's a combination of so many trusted players bringing the solution to the customer. And I think what people might not know is the complexity of some of that. They just think, okay, set me up a prepaid card, and you'll see people spend millions to do it, and you'll see people spend hundreds of thousands to do it, just depending on how they look at the ecosystem and if they do their research to get them into the market. But I do think it's one of the easiest ways to start helping customers in a new way for a new use case, is coming to the prepaid space.
That makes sense. So I feel like we've touched on embedded finance a couple times here, and you know, that's the latest and greatest, I feel like, buzzword in payments. And you know, when we're talking about embedded finance, we're talking about you know, financial services, payment offerings within non-financial brands. And I'd love to get your perspective on, one, where do you guys think this is going? Because we seem to be at the tip of the iceberg here with respect to embedded finance. And then two, what specifically is Prepaid's role going to be in the rollout of our embedded finance future? Who wants to start?
I think I'll jump in.
Michelle, you jump in, I'll chime in after. Go ahead.
Fair. I think from an open banking perspective, you know, as we look to banking as a service across the world and looking to other markets like the UK, Australia, and Brazil, and even markets in Canada and the US, what we're doing in advance of open banking is you're seeing prepaid layer in a lot of different services to become this banking as a service. And a lot of the challenger banks, like if you look at different organizations across the world, even Revolut, unfortunately not in Canada at the moment, but I think when you look at their service and how they've layered on different offerings for their customer, to be one API to multiple financial offerings is definitely the way of the future. Consumers want to have multiple ways to utilize their services and ensure that they're saving money. And I think you're seeing like affiliate marketing so that there's more saving opportunities within challenger banks. You're seeing microloan opportunities for buy now, pay later, which is a big trend. And just so many different services for rewards, insurance, and peer-to-peer payments that challenger banks and prepaid is actually very well set up to be that API of APIs, to be a banking as a service infrastructure, and to really help their customers have a lot of options. But Scott, please add. No,
it's very similar, Michelle, to kind of the way that I was talking about the blurring of these lines. I kind of think of that in the same context of embedded finance, right? So as you think about embedded finance, yes, I think that what we're seeing more and more is you're going to have these services, and most of those are going to be consolidated in potentially into one app. Now, what we're seeing on our platform today, embedded finance, I think, Jennifer, as you mentioned, we're literally just scratching the surface on the types of use cases out there, right? We all know Lyft and Uber, and it's hard to imagine, what that was like before. And it's just kind of, so common now. But you think of any of these types of services, there's just more and more of them coming up all the time. And the payment instrument is at the center of all of those types of services. So I think that you're going to continue to see growth in unique concepts there. We know obviously with DoorDash and picking up groceries and Shipt and these types of companies that have done this. But again, that's just going to continue to grow. And I do think we're going to see more of these services being layered in, kind of into more of these kind of blended super apps. But again, the payment is at the heart of those. Those constructs don't work without an easy payment construct to make
Yes.
innovation, really function. And that's
critical, right? It's the easy part. Like if it's this super complicated or only certain people can use it or whatever, like it's not going to work because this is already, those of us who work in payments, like we forget, this is unbelievably complex. Like we're trying to put financial services into companies that have nothing to do with financial services, at a one click of the button kind of thing. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, Scott, but I just wanted to nail home that point that if it's not simple, there's no way that this is going to actually be adopted.
You're right. And I think what Prepaid has done is the word I always think about is it's got to be frictionless. What we have done by working in the industry, and working through this is with the technology, with the bank partners, et cetera, and the players out there, we've made a lot of these constructs frictionless, where now you can say, yeah, the payment, even though it's incredibly complex behind the scenes, it is very frictionless and easy for consumers to do this. And that's where the innovation is going to continue to happen. As long as that payment construct can be frictionless and these companies can continue to innovate, you're going to see embedded finance just continue to grow.
I would just weigh in, just real quickly. I couldn't agree more. And we'll continue to see the use cases expand. If you think about it, business is really the facilitation of the movement of value, right? And the exchange of value. It's commerce. And embedded within commerce is in payments. And so embedding the payment in that process to be a friction, ease, right? We will continue to see, if you think about really some of the companies that have come along in the last 8 years, they're not payments companies, right? But what they are very focused on is improving the user experience. And so within that, one element for them, but completely, where our livelihood is, but one element for them is that exchange of value, that payment experience. And so to make that experience better, easier, faster, seamless, and safer, these companies have developed, these customer experiences, these user interfaces, and therefore these payment application methodologies, right, to facilitate commerce for all those reasons. And we will continue to see these use cases expand. And in a post-COVID environment, I think we'll see them expand even faster.
I think that makes sense. Well, it certainly makes sense, and it's definitely the way that we're moving to. One of the things that I would love us to hit kind of head on is, folks have listened to this today, and we talked a little bit about the perceived inferiority and things of that nature. I do feel like we need to address fraud because it comes up all the time, as you all know, that there's some sort of a perception that there's a reputation for fraud on prepaid that is larger than other products. And I'd really love to just hit that dead on. And Jeremy, I'd love to start with you. I mean, is that accurate, not accurate? I think that's important for our viewers today to understand.
I would say that the perception is inconsistent with the practical reality. Does fraud occur? Absolutely, right? Just as it does in the credit and debit platform space as well. Anytime there is something of value, there are going to be those characters who are looking to exploit that, to steal it, right? And it exists in every avenue. But when you look at the true actual loss rates, and I'm not trying to diminish or dilute losses whatsoever. The one thing I hate more than anything are fraudsters who are successful and steal, from individuals and or businesses. But as a platform, again, using that terminology if I can for prepaid, the actual loss rates, are I believe that the concept or the theory that loss rates are higher than the other is not accurate.
Yeah, and I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I mean, what we see is there is a bad or misperception, conception, however you want to think about that, about prepaid. the numbers as far as loss just don't play out to sometimes that misperception. As Jeremy said, there's always going to be losses. These are payments. There's money that's being moved in. This happens. But as you look at it and you go back and look truly at the basis points of loss, as we look at it in our system, we look at different bin classifications. If you're doing everything that you need to be doing, and I think that what we have to make sure of is that where it's very clear, the processing platform, the program manager, the issuer, even the networks, we all have a role in making sure that fraud does not happen, whether it's on prepaid, debit, credit, whatever type of instrument. But when you look specifically at prepaid, and if you're doing all of the things that you should be, the loss rate is actually lower than kind of the published loss rates that Visa and MasterCard typically talk about on a credit portfolio, right? They are 3 or 4 basis points below that. So in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of reasons behind that, but you can look at that and say, if you're doing what you should on KYC and AML and everything else, prepaid typically will have lower loss rates than those other products. There is some fraud, it's never going to be 0 basis points of loss, but it is lower than some of those other constructs. So I think that's the message that we need to get out across the industry.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the Canadian.
I'm so sorry, Michelle, just one quick time check. I just want everyone to know we've only got about 4 or 5 minutes left. So if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, and I think if you just look at regulation, right, the KYC and AML infrastructure is just as strong as coming onto a credit card from a GPR perspective. So it has that same protection ratio of having that data to ensure the customer is who they say they are before you load them, and from a KYB perspective, that being embedded as well. So I think I full-heartedly agree with Scott as well as Jeremy that the rates are lower. And when someone's coming in as a new entrant and they're looking for debit, prepaid, or credit, and what is the best way for them to enter the market, and definitely the answer is prepaid. Even for some organizations that are already having $4 billion under management and are looking to go to a payment system for their customers, it's still very expensive to come into the credit space and very complex to come into the debit space, but they could quite easily within 6 months launch a prepaid card that has all the functionality and fraud protection ratio that they would need to service their customers. So I think it's a phenomenal way to really innovate.
That's great. I just want to thank you all for answering that, because I feel like it just comes up all the time. And so anybody who's thinking about utilizing the prepaid platform really does need to understand what the accurate information is around that. So thank you. Okay, so we have 3 minutes left. I don't see anything in the chat right now, but I will watch for it. But here's what I would love for us to close with then, since we don't have any questions. And nobody will hold you to this, but I'd love for each of you to give us one prediction, okay? But don't give a safe one. Give me like a wild or sort of like, stretch prediction of what a post-COVID, payments environment's gonna look like over the next 2 to 3 years, either with a cool new use case or something you think will change. I think that would be great. And just quickly, so let's do that. And then we do have a question on areas of vulnerability within the prepaid value chain. So maybe we could just answer that quickly. Maybe Scott, you're the best to answer that. So maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, as far as areas of vulnerability, I'm not 100% sure exactly what that's referring to, but as I think I'll answer both very quickly because we're just at time. Are there vulnerabilities in the prepaid value chain? I think that you could look at that and say there's potential vulnerabilities in prepaid debit, credit. I think as you look at this, I could look at that from a fraud perspective. I could look at that from an AML perspective. I could look at that from an IT security perspective. So overall, I think that the prepaid infrastructure works well as long as you're doing what you should be doing. You can be very successful in this industry. As far as my bold prediction, Jennifer, really very quickly, the only good thing coming out of COVID, other than being a Zoom shareholder, is contactless. Not that this takes rocket science, but the US has been so far behind in contactless. That is really the only good thing. And I think what you're going to continue to see is finally what needed to happen to get contactless. Not that that's that new, but just the number of payments that we're finally seeing across our platform never ceases to amaze me how much growth we've seen in contactless. So that's, I don't know, that's really bold, but it's going to continue to grow.
Okay, Michelle or Jeremy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll let Jeremy have the last thought, but as I look to the future, I'm hopeful that open banking is not just something we talk about in North America, but both in Canada and the US. It's something that we implement in the next 18 months and really give request to pay and competition back to the market and get better, fairer bank fees to both Canadians and Americans through that infrastructure.
Thank you, Michelle. So I think as far as number one, I think post-COVID, we're just going to see an acceleration and expansion in the number of use cases for facilitating, the transfer of value, the commerce, that exchange, payments, right? And while I think there's multiple areas, one that I see where there's so much opportunity yet to expand and grow is in the healthcare and insurance space, whether it's B2B, B2C, C2B, take your alphabet soup, mix it all up. But however you want to facilitate transactions, but in the healthcare and insurance space is a segment that I think is going to just continue to expand. I think it's slow with adoption because of change, but the opportunity is huge.
So we have two quick questions here, Shiloh. Can we stay on and answer them, or should we send them around after answers?
This is leading into a break, so it's okay, but anything you don't answer can be answered via the chat feature in Google.
Okay, well, if my panelists do you guys have 2 minutes to answer these two questions? Are
Absolutely.
we good? Okay.
Sure.
So the first one we've got is, with such rapid growth in prepaid use, what are the biggest challenges companies face for getting consumers to choose and use their card? And what are some of the solutions they're using to increase adoption? Michelle, you might be great to take this one.
Yeah, I think it's taking on other opportunities, like I was saying earlier, to add in some affiliate marketing offers, to find promotions that they could do by having their paycheck be put into their prepaid account so that they have money in there, or even just allocating, let's say, their fund money, which a lot of people do. They have their core banking with the top 10, top 5, but they'll do like $500 a month goes to their prepaid card, and that's what they're going to spend at restaurants and spas and so on. So just making sure that there's some type of incentive to get them to have pre-deposits coming in on a monthly basis, and that will definitely increase use, as well as trying to have some offers in there that are going to be relevant to your customers on a daily, monthly basis.
Great, thanks, Michelle. And then Jeremy, maybe you can answer this one quickly. We've got a question about sort of cash access, like, is it hard to get access to cash? Maybe you could just take that one.
So, I mean, again, varying by product, there are certainly those that are designed that don't have cash access, because with that typically comes different, compliance obligations, right? But for those that do have it, I don't believe access to cash has been a challenge. There are so many free ATM, over the counter, cash back at point of sale. So, and all of that is our utility and functionality that's available. There's others, obviously, you can ACH out, you can, Visa Direct, MasterCard Send, being enabled. And so there's just so many different ways of moving the value, but cash out specifically, again, based upon the product type. I think there's a variety of options that exist.
Well, great. Well, that is more than our time. So thank you so much for you all staying on for an extra 3 minutes to answer questions. I want to thank our panelists, such a group of experts. Definitely connect with them through the app if you have additional questions, or you can contact me and I can set you up with the right people to speak to. But we're just all fans of prepaid. We're all, passionate payment nerds, and really believe that prepaid is that, wonderful solution for payments innovation. So feel free to always get in touch with us. And again, thank you to all of you for joining today. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the conference.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Jennifer.
everyone.
Bye all.